For the month of July, we've already seen total number of migrations, 110,000 into the European continent. That is compared to the month of July last year, already tripled. How should we understand, Mr. Zoukopoulos, this huge number of increase just over 1 year's time?
Thank you for this invitation. I should say that there are some conditions which facilitate the travel of many migrants to Greece and Italy during this period, and this is mainly related to the good weather. So because of the good weather, since March we have observed this rise in the number of refugees and asylum seekers who come to Greece. At the same time, another factor which plays a very important role is the political instability in Greece. So as long as refugees hear via the voice of human smugglers that they can easily come to Greece, then they prefer this road in their attempt to come to Western and Northern Europe.
I see.
However, I should say that the problem is...
Go ahead, you say?
Yeah, however, I should say that the problem is mainly related to human smugglers, and this is where the policy of the European Union should concentrate in order for a solution to be found in the near future. So although Greece can be blamed about a lot of things regarding the status of its economy, the country is not alone responsible for the problem of migration. It definitely needs the support of the European Union.
Okay, Professor Toker, what is your view? Is this huge flow of migration into the European continent, particularly into the Western and Mediterranean countries inside Europe, going to be a temporary phenomenon, exceptional case, or this is going to be a long-term phenomenon? It is going to be the norm, in fact.
It might be closer to a norm kind of syndrome than to an exceptional one, or rather an accumulation of exceptional elements like our colleague in Athens just enumerated, to which one should add, by the way, the ambiguous position of Turkey, for example, which facilitates the arrival towards Greek shores. We saw similar phenomena in Spain with crossing across Gibraltar a few years ago. We saw a similar phenomena over Italian shores over the last 2 years or so because of the situation in Libya. We see the major pressure right now on Greece, but in parallel there are tens of thousands of individuals crossing the eastern borders of the continent from the direction of Ukraine and Belarus and Bulgaria and elsewhere. So the problem will stay with the European Union. The problem will stay with the world. And this is why I think that the major aspect we should try and analyze is really the political one, or the political ones, which lead to the phenomenon we constate.
Professor Toker, I think there are two issues. One is how to prevent huge masses of immigrants coming into Europe, after all, or into the Western and Mediterranean parts of the European countries. After all, it's going to be a huge burden for these places. On the other hand, once they come over here, what to do with them? These are two separate issues. Let's focus on what to do with them first. Is this an ideological difference between, let's just say, Western European countries, so-called multiculturalism, vis-a-vis Central European countries, and also Eastern European countries' reluctance to subscribe to it?
You are right. There are ideological and conceptual differences between different governments in different parts of the continent. But in an objective, analytical, realpolitik way, we are all on the same boat. Let us be Hungary, Britain, Germany, France, or Greece. There's no difference in that, especially in the medium and long range. Medium.
Well, you could argue that way, Professor. You could argue that way, but let me just quote the officials coming from Slovakia, of course, an EU country now, who said that they are willing to accept, yes, 200 migrants into Slovakia. However, they have to be Christians. So there seems to be a lot of preconditions and also the sets of limits of numbers coming into these countries. And you are telling me there's no difference among the opinions among these countries? Professor Toker.
Yes, the example you just quoted is indeed a very disturbing one, because we're speaking about a very small 5 million population of 5 million of Slovakia, which actually accepted, so to speak, its part of the quota, which was distributed between the European nations, and accepting to take 200 individuals under the conditions that these individuals would not be Muslim, which is, of course, extremely disturbing for many humanitarian, political, ideological, and whatever reasons. Whatever the share would be, and whatever the short-run solutions would be, and they could include police people and gendarmes and special budgets in order to reinforce security over one border or second border. This is not the way this problem would find an end.
All right.
The way would be overall political, and the problems would have to be solved at the source, namely in Northern Africa, in Iraq, in Syria,
you could argue that. You could always argue that, sir. You could solve the source of the problem, but the source of the problem is not easily to be solved, and therefore you are going to expect more immigrants, whether legal or illegal, coming into the European countries. So that's why I'm focusing on the second part, which I mentioned, Mr. Cui here in Beijing. That is the question about what if these people arrive on the European continent, what to do with them, whether European countries are really, quote unquote, as Mr. Toker just said, in the same boat. Of course, we understand that back in June, some of the Central European countries have already been uniting among themselves against the quota system. And now even with the quota system, they're putting some preconditions, and they are saying, this is the Western European, your ideology, you better handle it yourself, rather than putting all this pressure on us. After all, we don't subscribe to your ideology. Mr. Cui, what is your observation?
Yes, exactly. I think from outside we can find out indeed there are, a big gap between those member states of the European Union. And also we can find out maybe it's another showcase of this we call the structural fault for this European integration. Because now we have, they do have a single, how to say, platform for this Schengen region. But another problem is the very, very different immigration policy for different member states. For example, how is it different between the Nordic country, Germany, and especially the Southern European countries, Central and Eastern European countries? Very, very different. And also, of course, it's easy to say that we share the same ideology, okay? But how is the policy? How is the real solution for this? And now also I think we need to understand the background of now, because Europe is facing so many challenges. Even for some governments, they want to receive more and more refugees or immigrants. How could they explain it to the local people? So that we have to pay more.
So with all of these different understandings of whose responsibility it is, and different history and cultural background about immigration in different countries, do you think the Central European countries are really in the same boat with your country and also maybe with some of the Western European countries? Mr. Zokopoulos.
No, they are not on the same boat, but in my opinion, the reason is not related to any ideological differences. It is related to the fact that they do not want to host the immigrants who are coming from Greece and Italy. The problem started many years ago with the war in Afghanistan in 2001 and was deteriorated a few years ago with the so-called Arab Spring and the instability in Syria. So the European Union, and especially the most powerful countries of the European Union, had paid no attention to the problem at that time, because the problem could then be confined to Greece and Italy. But now they start to realize that this policy was a parochial one, and that they have to better cooperate now with Greece and Italy and provide a solution to the problem. So in my view, the countries are not on the same boat, but they should be, because otherwise the crisis which now starts in Greece and Italy, and it is a humanitarian crisis, will soon expand into the whole old continent.
Mr. Toker, though, is this the solution, what Mr. Zoukopoulos said, let's just subscribe to the same kinds of ideology, same kind of idea, same kind of agreement, or actually the agreement, even the legal document, has to be updated from your perspective to fit into the current situation. After all, it was 1951, the Refugee Convention stated all of these principles, not to return all of these refugee seekers and also asylum seekers. But now things have changed so much, as Mr. Zoukopoulos just mentioned. What do you think is the real solution, the fundamental solution, and the real attitude these days European countries should have toward these kinds of migrations?
Well, let me put it in a provocative, however real, which according to me is not it's a provocative way of putting it, but it's not a false one. I wouldn't be able to say that if I were not a university professor or a commentator, and if I were a minister or a leader of any party in any coalition government in Europe. But Europe, with almost 400 million inhabitants and with its wealth and potential, can indeed take inside into its territory 500,000, even 1 million immigrants per year, not for 25 years long, but let's say in a crisis, an extremely punctual crisis such as this year. I mean, Europe can take it, and I would even go further. I would say that countries like Germany and others which suffer of demographic decline and need actually young people energized, who are motivated, who are ready to go long distances in order to succeed, could help German economy and other very developed economies. So one shouldn't put it just in terms of impossibility. Europe can take them, and if you wish even to go even further, Europe should take them, because the wealthier world should be, in one way or the other, should manifest some kind of solidarity with those developing countries.
I did notice, Professor, I did notice that you keep on mentioning Germany without mentioning much of your own country, France. But I would like to go back to you, Mr. Zoukopoulos, before we go. Do you think what Mr. Toker had been just talking about, is it idealistic opinion he's having about that Europe would be able to absorb all of this, or actually there are best practices that can be used to achieve what he has just described?
Well, I hope what he described could happen, but politics are mainly based on cynicism. So what we see in the last months is that the initial agreement for a quota redistribution of refugees from Greece and Italy to other European countries, which was initially at 40,000 refugees, was diminished to 32,000, and there are still political differences. So I'm not optimistic at all for a solution to be found, but if I would focus on only one point where the policy of the European Union should concentrate,